Hey, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth
on Now You Know.
So this is Zach and Jesse's solution to pollution.
Now, I mean, who cares? Pollution, schmallution. I mean, what effect does it have? I mean, it's maybe just killing some kind of rare breed of frog somewhere. I mean, whatever. I mean, do we really need to be worrying about this?
Well, what about the cost? I mean, putting aside frogs or whatever, how about could I argue just the cost to you?
Yeah, I mean, sure, what is it, like a couple $100, maybe a few $1,000s?
Actually, it was calculated to be $4.6 trillion in 2015.
Ooh, that's a lot of money.
And 9 million people died that year because of pollution.
In 1 year?
In 1 year.
9 million people?
Yeah.
Because of what, pollution?
Yeah, so would you like to take back your argument?
Well, maybe. I mean, that's crazy.
That's equivalent to the global economic output of Japan, which is the third largest in the world, just to pollution.
Why? What?
Yeah, so the Lancet Commission commissioned this study on pollution and health, and it was published last week in the UK Medical Journal. These numbers are astounding. Pollution has a real cost to human lives, and we don't count it whenever we're talking about doing things. We just talk about the cost of something in dollars, but we don't also factor in the cost of health and death to people by what is going to happen to their air. This kind of hit home, I think, with a lot of us with the VW Dieselgate scandal.
Yeah.
When it was found that their cars were actually polluting way more than they said they were, and they were faking the results. And so this story was sent to me last week. It's a BBC story about a father and his son. This son used to go on the ferry with his dad, and when they were on the ferry, you'd sit there for like 15 minutes before the ferry launches, and all the cars would keep their engines running to keep warm. And the father, who was a doctor, would tell his kids, roll up the windows, I'm shutting off the car, this is horrible for us to be standing outside in this ferry with all this, cars running. And the son, this stuck in the son's mind, and so now that he's older, he's a reporter, he's decided, hey, I'm going to run this story, and let's take my dad's car, which is kind of new, and my car, which is kind of old, and let's see what kind of emissions we're getting out of the car. Even though these pass emission standards in England, are these healthy emissions coming out of the car?
Right, okay.
And it wasn't easy for him to do this. He had to go find this guy who runs a company that consults, and he had to get this big, looks like 1980s gear and put it in the back of his car and drive around and do all this testing to both cars. What this all boils down to, he came up with, is that both these cars are polluting way more than they should be.
Way more than they say they do?
Well, yeah, more than, because first of all, a 20-year-old car is not going to be running in tip-top shape, right?
Okay.
But even the newer car that his dad drives isn't a clean car. And so many people thought, especially in Europe, oh, we're told to buy a new diesel car and that'll solve all our environmental problems. And so they did. People went out by the millions and bought diesel cars thinking they were being helpful.
Right.
Turns out they weren't. They were polluting badly. This story kind of hit home to me because it was showing his dad understood the risks, trying to do the right thing, but for years has been polluting. And we all have that mentality. We're just told what to do, we do it, and we think, well, we're doing the right thing, we bought a diesel car. It's not the right thing. It's burning fossil fuels, it's polluting. Now this report comes out and tells us what an impact this is having on us. It's worse in other countries outside of, let's say, the US.
Right. If you look at this map here, you can see the effects really take their toll in the developing nations and underdeveloped nations. Pollution basically is just a fact of life. And here's a little tidbit for you. Starvation.
I know it, yes.
It's the worst thing, it contributes, how awful starvation. About 1 million people a year die from starvation.
Wow.
And it's terrible. But 9 million people die because of pollution.
Wow.
So 9 times more people die from pollution than starvation.
That's amazing, because my whole life I was told, send money and food to countries that don't have enough food, and you will help them. And that is true. You should do that. But
you're also sending all of this pollution, and you're buying products that are causing pollution. It's mind-boggling.
It is. I mean, a disease caused by pollution accounts for about 1 in 6 deaths worldwide. Wow. This is a quote from Richard Fuller. I was shocked when we started running the numbers to see what a substantial impact it had on health. And this is Richard Fuller, the co-chairman of the commission and the founder of Pure Earth, which is a nonprofit that cleans up toxic sites around the world. I like this quote here from Francesca Dominici. She's a professor of biostatistics at Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health. She says, in the scientific community, I don't think there is any disagreement about the cost-benefit analysis of controlling pollution. The major barrier has been political, but not scientific.
Wow. So, I mean, scientists agree around the world that now pollution is one of the greatest causes of not just human loss of life, but also economic losses.
Yeah, you know who else agrees with you?
Who?
Chinese President Xi Jinping.
Wow.
So he basically last week spoke to the National Congress of the Communist Party. It's a major gathering of the party that meets every 5 years. He gave this speech that lasted over 3 hours. Wow. And guess what? He mentioned the word environment more often than he mentioned the word economy. Yeah, here's some quotes from his speech. He said, any harm we inflict on nature will eventually return to haunt us. This is a reality we have to face. China must develop a new model of modernization with humans developing in harmony with nature. Almost 20% of deaths in China are attributable to pollution, according to the Lancet Commission report.
So this really explains why the Prime Minister is talking about pollution. It's because Chinese middle class have basically realized that this is happening to them. It is affecting, themselves, their families, their children, and they're going out in droves in opposition to all of this pollution and saying, something has to be done about this. People are dying.
Right. In India and Bangladesh, about a quarter of fatalities are tied to pollution. In the U.S., 6% of deaths are attributable to pollution.
Right.
Now, I don't want to minimize that. That's a huge number of people. Mm-hmm. But you can see why in countries like India and Bangladesh, it's an even bigger problem.
Right. And you can see why in countries like the U.S., we don't care about it quite as much.
Right. Now, one good point that the authors of the study bring out is that many people over the years have tied economic growth with pollution controls, saying that if you attack pollution, you're going to actually be attacking your economy. They've kind of proven this to be untrue. They've shown that there's been a 250% increase in our GDP in the United States since 1970, when President Nixon signed the Clean Air Act. We've reduced air pollutants by about 70%.
Right. So both an increase in GDP and a decrease in pollution. And that makes sense because if you think about it, the less pollution, the less sick you're going to be, and the more you're going to be able to output.
So let's talk about what China's trying to do to clean up the environment. In the world today, there is 130 gigawatts of solar manufacturing.
I don't understand. What do you mean?
So what that means is there's 130 gigawatts of solar manufacturing capacity. Factories could put out as much as 130 gigawatts of solar panels every year.
Every year, okay. All right, interesting.
So in China, they can produce 80 gigawatts of solar every year.
Okay.
So that makes sense. 130 gigawatts the entire world can make. China can make 80 gigawatts of that.
Wow, so that's a huge portion of it.
Right. So last year, China installed 34 gigawatts of solar panels. By comparison, the US installed only 14.6 gigawatts.
Okay, so
and that was double what we did the year before.
Wow, so it's still less than half.
Now, in June and July of this year, China installed 25 gigawatts of solar.
In just 2 months?
In just 2 months.
Wow.
They're on par to have 50 gigawatts of solar installed just this year.
Wow, so they're really, really ramping up installation of solar.
That's right. They're going to push the world's installation of solar to over 100 gigawatts this year. So up until this point, I think a lot of people, especially Americans, thought, oh, well, China is just making all these factories so they can ship all these solar panels to other countries.
Right, and we were also thinking, oh, China's just running everything on coal. They're just trying to boom their economy. That's all they're trying to do. And I mean, it could have been true for a while, but if you look now, we're really seeing that China has taken a complete U-turn. And now they are the leaders in solar production and solar installation.
Exactly.
And there's a huge reason for that, and that's because the people saw what would happen if they didn't do so.
Let's go back to that $4.6 trillion per year back in 2015. If you make the world cleaner, you save money.
Right.
So
you
even
save
if you don't
lives.
Yeah, even if you don't care about the lives though, you're saving money. It makes economic sense to install solar, wind, and other renewable energy.
Right.
So a friend of the show sent me this. This is in Orange County, California. They're thinking of banning leaf blowers, gas-powered leaf blowers.
Okay.
And they did some pretty cool, there's some pretty cool information here, which I didn't know about. So exhaust pollution per leaf blower per hour is the equivalent of the amount of smog from 17 cars driven 1 hour and is localized in the area of the blower usage.
So, I mean, think about it. That's like having 17 cars just doing donuts around you as you're using your leaf blower.
Now, on top of that, the high velocity air jets that are used in blowing leaves, they whip up dust, right, and pollutants. Well, that particulate matter, PM, that is swept into the air by blowing the leaves is composed of dust, fecal matter, pesticides, fungi, chemicals, fertilizers, spores, and street dirt, which consists of lead and organic and elemental carbon. And 5 pounds of PM, particulate matter, per leaf blower per hour are swept into the air, and they take hours to settle out.
That's gross. That's gross. Yuck.
So what can you do? So first thing I would say is if you're going to use a leaf blower, use an electric one.
And then I would say if you were going to use a leaf blower, don't.
Or at least wear a respirator. But think about all the other people around you. You've just blown that stuff into the air. Now they're all going to be breathing it too.
Maybe consider buying a rake. I think they're cheaper to maintain and run than a gas-powered leaf blower. But I mean, yeah, electric leaf blower, at least you're not generating 17 cars worth of pollutants in an hour.
And I mean, we just did an episode of our autonomous driving future on pollution, air pollution. You should go check that out. We give some statistics about stuff that comes out of your tailpipe.
And let me tell you, I went home and I bought an air filter. I went on Amazon, I said, you know what, I do not want to get cancer, I do not want to get asthma, I do not want to die. I'm going to buy myself a nice big HEPA air filter. And at least when I'm in my house, I am safe.
I mean, this is why Elon put them in the Model X, for instance.
It makes so much sense after you learn about because when you're on the highway, that's the worst. Because all the cars around you are spewing. Anytime you're on a street with other cars, and maybe it's even your car, it's just polluting straight out the tailpipe.
I think the sad thing about this story is until you put a figure of how many people you're killing every year and how much money it's costing you, air pollution doesn't seem like a real thing. It just seems like it'd be nice to fix it, but when you put a price tag of $4.6 trillion and 9 million people a year dying, then you go, wait a minute, why haven't we fixed this problem?
Right. And we're just so used to thinking of air pollution as being huge, big diesel trucks when they have the big billowing smoke. And that is horrendous air pollution.
And it's a huge percentage of the problem.
But just the normal air when you go outside. Today was a beautiful fall day and I went outside and went, and then I was like, ugh, because it's still in there.
Yeah, and you can't see it. PM 10 and PM 2.5, we're talking 2.5 microns, 10 microns. You can't see that except with an electron microscope.
A high-powered electron microscope.
And your body can't get rid of it. Once it's in there, it's in your lungs, it's in your bloodstream. That's it.
It gets stuck with you until you die.
Right. And yes, some countries are cleaner than others, but we all have this pollution. We all have it. Just some have it worse than others.
Right.
Let's get to the point where we don't have any of it.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of In Depth. We hope that it's helpful for you. Go buy an air filter for air filtration device
or
for your
go buy an
house.
electric car.
Yeah, go buy something that is gonna just fix that.
Fix one problem. Yeah, go get an electric-powered leaf blower instead of or don't blow your leaves, actually.
Just rake them. Or just leave them. Do we really need to have beautiful lawns,
what
people?
did we do before leaf blowers? Did they take care of themselves?
We just raked the areas that you needed. You
Hire some kids in your neighborhood. It's good exercise.
Yeah. All right, thank you so much for watching. Now you know.